Hi, I'm Luminaria Star, and this is a Metaphysician's Journal. Hi. Well, on this day, March 21st, we have a number of historically significant events that have happened throughout history. And so let's begin with in 1844, when the Baha'i calendar began. This is the first day of the first year of the Baha'i calendar in the Baha'i faith. It's annually celebrated as the Baha'i New Year, or Nowruz. I hope I said that correctly. March 21st is celebrated as such because it's the anniversary of the day in 1844 that Mirza Ali Muhammad declared his spiritual purpose and renamed himself Bab, which translates to door or gate, thus founding Babism, which is the philosophical predecessor to the Baha'i faith. The Baha'i believe that the Bab was also the spiritual return of Elijah and then John the Baptist, and that he was the avatar or prophet referred to in the Zoroastrian scriptures. Baha'u'llah, who is the official founder of the Baha'i faith, which followed afterwards, was originally a follower of the Bab and claimed to be the fulfillment of his promise that God would send another messenger. Babism and Baha'i are, in a sense, a Persian equivalent of the New Thought movement, taking as radical a departure from the older dominant religion of the region as New Thought did from Christianity in the West. And on this day, in 1871, journalist Henry Morton Stanley began his trek to find the missionary and explorer Dr. David Livingstone, thus giving rise to the often quoted "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?" to which the somewhat less famous reply was supposed to have been, "Yes, I feel thankful that I am here to welcome you." These famous words may have been a fabrication, as Stanley later tore out the pages of this encounter in his diary. But the words are famous because of their perceived humorous nature. You see, Dr. Livingstone was the only white person for hundreds of miles at the time. And on this day in 1965, Dr. Martin Luther King led 3,200 people on the start of the third and finally successful civil rights march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. A great many folks don't realize that this march was a very long 54 miles of highway and had been attempted 2 other times, and that the purpose was to register black voters, to reestablish and protect their right to vote as American citizens. The next time you consider whether or not to vote, please understand that this was not just some random event that happened a long time ago. This is something that people died for within living memory, so that we could all have a say in how we are governed. And on 1970, on this day, the first Earth Day proclamation was issued by the mayor of San Francisco, Joseph Alioto. But the story has a few twists and turns. In 1969, at a UNESCO conference in San Francisco, peace activist John McConnell proposed a day to honor the Earth and the concept of peace, to first be celebrated on March 21st, 1970, which was the first day of spring in the Northern Hemisphere. This day of nature's equipoise was later sanctioned in a proclamation written by Mr. McConnell and signed by Secretary-General U Thant at the United Nations. A month later, a separate Earth Day was founded by United States Senator Gaylord Nelson in an environmental teach-in first held on April 22, 1970, and from then on it was celebrated on that day instead of March 21st, but the original Earth Day was March 21st. And on this day in 2006, the social media site Twitter was founded. And we have some significant birthdays. In 1806, Benito Juarez, Mexican lawyer and politician, and the 25th President of Mexico, was born. His complete name was Benito Pablo Juarez Garcia, and he was a Zapotec Indian from Oaxaca, Mexico, who was orphaned by the age of 3. He overcame a long series of very hard struggles in life against overwhelming odds in an age when indigenous people were being exterminated and advancement was virtually impossible. He spent a time as a domestic servant, and then became a lawyer and then a judge. He served as a state governor of Oaxaca for about 5 years, and then went into exile for a while in New Orleans, Louisiana, because of his objection to the corrupt military dictatorship of Santa Anna. Juarez became president of the Supreme Court of Justice, bringing with him a new liberal constitution, and then served as interim president of Mexico during a prolonged, rocky period when conservatives tried to depose the liberal government at the time. He found himself continually being opposed by the Catholic Church, which backed the ethnically European conservatives and controlled a great deal of the wealth in the country. He tried to redistribute some of that wealth with somewhat forcible means, and instituted equal rights for all citizens regardless of their heritage, which was also very, very strongly opposed by the conservatives. Finally, in 1861, he was officially elected president, but was under continual siege from all sides and was always fighting to stabilize the government under treacherous and dangerous conditions. The U.S. backed him, but proved to be an unstable mentor, since we were then fully occupied by the Civil War and its aftermath. Juarez was a Freemason and founded the Rito Nacional Mexicano Lodge, in which he held the symbolic name of Guillermo Tell, which is the Spanish language equivalent of William Tell. An insignificant but interesting detail: Juarez was considered one of the shortest presidents in world history, standing only 4 foot 6 inches in height. And in 1839, Modest Mussorgsky, the Russian composer, who was one of a famous circle of composers known as the Five, was born. The Five met periodically in St. Petersburg, Russia in the mid to late 1800s. The group had the aim of producing a specifically Russian kind of art music rather than one that relied on European-style conservatory training. They were a part of the Romantic nationalist movement of the era in Russia, bringing attention to the rich cultural traditions of Russian art forms and folklore. His most famous works include the opera Boris Godunov, the orchestral tone poem Night on the Bald Mountain, and the piano suite Pictures at an Exhibition. And in 1866, Antonia Maury was born. She's the American astronomer who was one of the highly skilled women who worked at the Harvard College Observatory as one of the so-called Harvard computers, who processed astronomical data in an era long before electronic devices were even dreamed of. She observed stellar spectra and published an important catalogue of classifications in 1897. Her innovations were later proven to be essential in devising a system of identifying giant and dwarf stars. Her most famous work was the spectroscopic analysis of the binary star Beta Lyrae. And my personal favorite, in 1943, Vivian Stanshall, English songwriter, singer, guitarist, and painter, who founded the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, was born. He was a wildly eccentric, extremely talented, and classically trained musician and artist. He participated in numerous performing art enterprises and always sought the most humorous, surreal, and absurd means of self-expression. He met many of his collaborators while in art school in London, and just to give you some idea of what kind of impression he must have made, here is what Neil Innes, one of the other members of the Bonzos, said of their first meeting. "We first met in a big Irish pub in South London, the New Cross Arms. He was quite plump in those days, and he was wearing Billy Bunter check trousers, a Victorian frock coat, black coat-tails, a horrible pair of little oval violet-tinted pince-nez glasses. He had a euphonium under his arm and large rubber false ears. And I thought, well, this is an interesting character." They participated in notable collaborations with the Beatles and many of the members of the Monty Python's Flying Circus performance team. Over time, he worked and associated with many other notables such as Eric Clapton, Keith Moon, Pete Moss, Steve Winwood, Jim Capaldi, and Madeline Bell. Through his long and bizarre career, Stanshall never lost his sense of absurd humor. His exploits are legendary, and he got lots of other people talked into participating in some of these with him. In one example, Stanshall went into a tailor's shop where he admired a pair of trousers. Keith Moon came in shortly afterward, posing as another customer, and admired the same trousers, demanding to buy them. When Stanshall protested, the two men pretended to fight, splitting the trousers in two so that they ended up with one leg each. The tailor was beside himself. Just then, a one-legged actor hired by Stanshall and Moon came in, saw the split trousers, and proclaimed, "Aha! Just what I was looking for!" Somewhat late in life, he married Pamela Kai Longfellow, with whom he had a daughter, Silky. They collaborated in writing a comic opera, Stinkfoot, which has had some intermittent success. Tragically, Stanshall died in March 1995 in an electrical fire which had broken out as he slept in his flat in North London. He is survived by his widow and daughter, and many friends who remember him both vividly and fondly, and continue to produce works based on or inspired by his creations. And, in addition, I wish you a very happy spring equinox. And that concludes this edition of A Metaphysician's Journal. Blessed be.